today, man, I'm stoked. I've got a legend in the field, a legend in tobacco, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to be asking him all kinds of questions. And it's Russ. You know what? I don't even want to say his last name because I know a lot of people massacre his name. So I'm going to have him on, and I'm going to have him say how massacred his name was, and then I guess we'll say it. So there's my dog barking, but don't worry about it. And without further ado, I'm going to shut up. And here's Russ. Russ, man, thank you so much for being on. I swear to God.
Thank you for having me, Dan. And the last name's pronounced Ouellette.
Ouellette. So Russ Ouellette is a Tigod Sherbrooke. Actually, were you born in Sherbrooke, or were you born in the States?
No. My grandmother was born in Sherbrooke.
And Sherbrooke. Okay, so Sherbrooke. I live in Quebec.
Yep.
I live in Canada. Sorry, was a joke. And Sherbrooke is like an hour and a half away from here, and it's a nice little town, and it's an old town, as a matter of fact. But anyways, Russ, again, thanks a lot, man, for doing this. I really appreciate your time. And your name, Ouellette, I'm sure the guys in the States don't even come close to saying Ouellette. I'd like to hear some. I'd like to hear some butchering of your names. How have you heard your name pronounced?
Ouellette, Quilletti. It's amazing. It's been mangled so many times in so many ways that when I actually run across somebody who pronounces it correctly, I'm in shock.
That's hilarious because I speak French. I live in Quebec, and Quilletti. Well, Quilletti's not bad.
It's amazing.
Oh, man. So Russ, let's go back to I was born in this hospital and all that stuff. So let's pass the hospital and let's get into your younger years. And I'm going to ask you that standard question. What got you into tobacco? Like, what got you interested in tobacco?
Well, my father was a pipe smoker. And he smoked a really intriguing blend. It was a burley-based blend. It had a little bit of latakia in it, but it also contained an herb, deer tongue.
Yeah.
And so it had a really neat aroma. In fact, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the smell of the tobacco so much that while he was at work and if I were home during the day, I'd sneak into the living room and pop the can open just so I could smell the tobacco.
Really?
Yeah, it smelled that great to me. And I didn't smoke anything until I was 19 years old, and I decided I was going to try a pipe.
Actually, that's quite late.
Yeah. I tried to be a good boy. But I picked up a pipe, and the pipe that I picked up was the pipe. If you've ever seen those, the Venturi, they were made of cast phenolic resin.
God!
With a graphite chamber. They weighed about 14 pounds. They transmitted heat so quickly that you couldn't even attempt to hold on to the bowl. And of course, being made out of resin and graphite, they didn't absorb squat.
No, nothing.
So they gurgled like hell. These things were made in such an odd way that they had to put O-rings on the tenon so that you didn't get an air leak. And that, along with a commercial tobacco that's still popular today, I'm not going to mention it because I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody's products,
I got you.
but this stuff nipped like a rabid skunk.
That's
It was
disgusting.
it was horrendous, and I was, but I didn't want to let my parents know that I was taking up a pipe.
But what they didn't have corn cobs back then?
Yeah, they did. I just saw this pipe. It was red. It was a red pot, straight pot, and I thought it looked neat. Not realizing that looking neat and smoking well were two totally different things. So I came home and I kind of stashed it away, and then my father happened to see it, and he said, "So you decided to try a pipe?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't think I'm going to stick with it, though." He said, "Why not?" I said, "I just fried my mouth, and I didn't enjoy it at all." He said, "If you're going to smoke a pipe, you're going to smoke a good pipe." And he said, "Come on, we're going to go to my tobacconist, and we're going to get you set up." So he got me a bent briar, and then he set me up with a Latakia blend. Now, the blend that I had tried was an aromatic. And got me a Latakia blend, and I packed up the bowl. And of course, at that time, everybody smoked in their car.
I
So
still
I
do.
packed, yeah, I packed the bowl and lit it up in the car on the way home, and it was like 180 degrees different. I mean, it smoked cool, it tasted good, the pipe stayed cool, and so I stuck with it. And the place that he went to had private label blends, their own shop blends. Well, at least that's what they told everybody. I found out in subsequent years that the tobacco that my father used to buy from them is exactly the same that was sold by a shop in Boston, by another one in Chicago. They were buying it from Philip Morris, pre-made, but they put their own name on it. So, but that shop shut down, and my father couldn't get his blend anymore, so he switched to smoking half and half. And so once I got a part-time job while I was in college working at a mall tobacco shop. And one of the first things I wanted to do was to see if I could replicate my father's blend.
How
So
old
that
were you? How?
I was 19.
Okay.
And that's when I got started with blending tobacco. And I stayed with that company for about 3 years, wound up as the assistant manager of 2 stores. Once I graduated from college, I stayed with them for a while. But that was the beginning of the downturn for the popularity of pipe smoking.
What year?
Um, it was around 1981, 82.
Holy cow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it started slipping in the 70s, but really in the 80s, there was a sharper downturn. And so the company was not making out as well. They couldn't afford to pay people very well. And, at that point, I was starting a family. So I had to move on to other things. For a while, I was working as a jobber, which meant that I worked for a company that represented a number of lines of cigars, pipes, pipe tobacco, and accessories. And I would go around to the brick and mortars and sell to the different stores. I did that for a little while, and basically the sales and profits from the sales barely covered my expenses. So I got out and I went into other things, although I still had friends from the tobacco shop who would ask me to make stuff for them. So I was doing that on my own. Um, and I was out for quite a while.
You mean out of the
And
business?
what's that?
Out of the business.
Yeah, out of the business. And then about 20 to 23 years ago, um, I had heard that a new shop opened up in the mall that my old shop was in. And so I went in to get the lay of the land, see what it was all about. And I started talking to the owner, and he was a nice guy. And I would occasionally go by and grab a couple of cigars. He had some tobaccos, but it was at that point very basic. And then he moved to a larger location in the mall and he started expanding a little bit on the pipe tobaccos and pipes.
Because
And
at that point, Russ, cigars were big. You were hitting big,
oh,
man.
cigars were the business.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm as well versed in cigars as I am in pipe tobacco. It's just that I'm more hands on with pipe tobacco. I've never made a cigar of my own, but I went to his shop one day and he said to me, "Hey, do you remember when you were working for that other store, a tobacco called Milk and Honey?" I said, "Yeah, I ought to know it. I probably made a couple of £1,000 of it." He said, "You wouldn't happen to remember what went into it?" I said, "Yeah, again, I made enough of it. I remember what was in it." He said, "Could you give me the recipe for it? Because people come in here and they think we're the old store and they want to buy that tobacco." So I told him what was in it. He said, "Oh, great. I've got those tobaccos here. I can make it right now." I said, "Cool." So I picked up some stuff and I went up to the counter to pay. And he said to me, "Your money's no good." And I said, "No, no, no, I want to pay for it." No, no, no. He said, "I'm going to make more money from what you just told me than what you're going
What
to
you're
pay
buying.
today." He said, "No." But every time after that I would stop by the shop, he would say, "So when are you going to come to work for me?" And this went on for a couple of years. And one day I had a lousy day at work. I mean, nothing went right. I was getting frustrated with the way that the business was being run, and I said, "I got to get out of here." And so it was payday. I cashed my check and stopped by his shop so I could get some cigars and some pipe tobacco. And once again, he saw me and said, "So when are you going to come to work for me?" I said, "You got 10 minutes?" And so we went to his office, we sat down, and I walked out that day with a new job, and I gave my notice. And then I went to work for him. And I was running the retail store. And after about 6 months, he said, "You said you blend pipe tobacco." I said, "Yeah, I've blended pipe tobacco." He said, "We have the pipe club that meets every month." He said, "How about you come up with half dozen blends? Let the guys try them and see what they think." I said, "Okay." So he let me go ahead and order component tobaccos. I got them in. I made up 6 blends. We had the meeting. The guys tried them and they were like, "Wow, these are good." I said, "Well, good. I'm glad you're happy," except for one guy. he wasn't upset. He wasn't negative, but he said, I've got a blend called 10 to Midnight. We still sell 10 to Midnight. It's a crumble cake, Latakia blend. And he said, that's very nice. He said, but I like more buttery tasting Latakia blends. I said, oh, hold on a second. I left the room, went back to the area where I do the blending. I put together tobacco. I came back out and handed him a bag, and I said, give it a try. He lighted the tobacco up, and he started smoking, and just this big grin broke out on his face, and he said, that's what I'm talking about. And so that became Larry's Blend, which is another one of the Hearth and Home originals. And so it went over so well that the manager or the owner said to me, well, let's make up enough, put them on jars, in jars. We'll put them out on the counter and we'll see how they go. And Pipes and Cigars was going on, but it was kind of a separate operation. Well, we put them out on the counters. People started buying them. They were selling quickly. He said, okay, let's put them on Pipes and Cigars. So we did. And I started going to pipe shows and stuff like that. And we went from 6 blends initially to over 20 blends in the space of a year.
All designed by Russ Ouellette?
Oh yeah, they're all mine. And it just blew up after that. I mean, first year, I think I made about 200 pounds of tobacco. Within 5 years, it was 10,000 pounds.
Jesus. And did you get a cut from that?
We won't go into that.
Okay.
But at that point, I was blending all 10,000 pounds.
Man, you were the bloody store.
I mean, I went from using a stainless steel bowl about this big to make blends in, to using 30-gallon containers to make them in. And sometimes I would have to make 2 or 3 of the same blend in one of those containers so that we could fill orders.
Now I'm writing stuff down as you're talking, Russ, because there's a lot of things I want to ask you.
Okay.
Now, sorry to cut you off. You want to continue?
No, well, and then it continued on for so well that and kept growing so fast that at some point we actually made an arrangement with Sutliff, and I went down to their factory in Richmond, Virginia, and spent 3 weeks working with their master blender so that we could produce my blends in their factory and have them come out as faithful as possible to what I was doing by myself. So,
and you were still working at that place?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So there's a conflict of interest here happening.
No. Sutliff was making them under contract for us.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, it was a contracted agreement. It still is.
Okay.
Sutliff still makes almost all the Hearth and Home tobaccos.
Okay.
And it's really strange because when I was first in the business, there was no such thing as knowing who a blender was.
Right.
I mean, yeah, okay. Like you knew about Rattray's coming from Charles Rattray's shop. But it wasn't, you didn't know about people like Greg Peace. You didn't know about people like Craig Tarler and Mike and Mary McNeil. That wasn't a thing then. So I had no idea what this was going to turn out to be. I had no desire, even in our little fishbowl of a hobby, to become a celebrity or anything.
I understand. I understand.
All I wanted to do was make good tobaccos. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to the Chicagoland show, which it's huge. It's the biggest show in the world.
Are you going there this year?
I don't know that we're going to have time to do it. I found out that they were actually having it a little too late to make plans, so
Okay.
we may have to skip it this year. But I was going there, and we're repping the product and getting people to try it and stuff like that. And after I'd gone there for maybe 3 or 4 years, one day I'm standing there and somebody walks up to me with a tin of one of my blends and says, "Could you sign this for me?" I was like, you want me to sign it? Yeah, would you sign it? And I was actually embarrassed.
I understand.
But of course, you want to, if somebody's complimenting your product,
Yes.
you want to accommodate them. So I did. And I struggled with that for like a couple of years, and then one day, one of our customers, who's a really, really good guy, somebody that I've become great friends with over the years, took me aside because he knew I was embarrassed. And he said, "Russ, they're trying to let you know that they like your work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't be embarrassed by it. It's the highest compliment you can get."
Mm-hmm.
And once I kind of absorbed that, I started enjoying it and having people come up and chatting me up at the shows and all.
Yeah.
And so now it's no big deal.
Yeah,
But
no, it is what it is, man, and it's good that it is that way. And I'm glad you said that. That finally, and I'm going to use rockstar as a word because I can't think of anything else. You know how chefs a few years ago, who
Yep.
the hell knew anything about cooking? Like we know Julia Child, and
Yep.
maybe some people know Jacques Pepin. Maybe,
Yep.
for God's sake, Jacques Pepin was the cook for 4 prime ministers in France.
Yep.
This guy's huge, anyways. And then the cigar craze came along, and you started to know Arturo Fuente and Davidoff and whom else? Padron, the guy who makes Padron cigars, and obviously the legends in Cuba, the Cohibas, the Partagas, and all that. Where the pipe tobacco blenders in there? Where the hell are they?
Yeah. And so yeah, I think it probably started. It started with the boutique manufacturers, the Cornell and Deals, McClelland. Once their stuff started hitting the market, it was more intimate. It wasn't a big factory cranking out tons of tobacco at a time.
So this is a little bit of marketing here.
Yeah, I mean, they were smaller, and so they always made sure to have a presence at these pipe shows. And so that's where people got to know who they are and got to know their names. And then also you had Pipes and Tobaccos magazine come out where they would feature people. And then there's the NASPC magazine, the Pipe Collector. They would also feature it. And all of a sudden, some people started getting a little bit of notoriety. And so, so some of the blenders became better known.
Yeah, rock stars, man. And I'm using rock stars. I'm saying that it's like It's like French wines or Italian wines, some of the famous houses. I mean, these guys are, they're gods, man. These guys walk on clouds, man. When they go to events, you always see them in these wicked castles and all that. And
Yeah.
next to the, I mean, in Monte Carlo, and they're driving, souped up, beautiful Lamborghinis. And again, I'm gonna say, where's the pipe tobacco blender in here?
Yeah.
Where is he? And the thing is, the reason why I'm saying this is because your nose is worth a lot of money, man.
Well, that's really something that we've talked a lot about over the years. I don't think you can do this successfully unless you've got a good palate.
Well, and don't discount the experience, for God's sake, that you got. You can't buy that, whether you have a good palate or not, man. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the funny thing about it is, though, a lot of people, I think, have more ability in that regard
Mm-hmm.
than they think they do. It's because when you take things out of context, it's kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I had somebody asking me about tasting and how do you develop the combinations? How do you understand what flavors work and what don't? And I was at a table and I had some white burley. So this is burley that isn't heavily fermented. And I said, load up a pipe. So they did, and they lit it up and started puffing. I said, what do you taste? Well, it's pretty bland. It's not, I don't taste much flavoring. I said, no, there isn't any flavoring on it. What do you taste? I'm not sure. I said, I'm going to toss something out at you and just think about it while you're puffing. I said, walnuts. And they're puffing on the pipe, and all of a sudden you could see the light in their eye. And they go, yeah, it does kind of taste like walnuts or pecans. I said, that's because it's out of context. You're not chewing it. You can't see a nut.
Right.
So you wouldn't recognize that flavor. But now that somebody said it to you, now you can taste the walnut. And I said, so that's what you have to do, is you have to pick apart the flavors that you're tasting and try to compare it to something that you're familiar with. So you do the same thing with Virginias, and what you're going to all of a sudden notice is hay or grass, or maybe a little hint of citrus.
Right.
And you wouldn't have done that just by smoking it on its own and coming up with it. You got to come up with something more.
So how did you develop that? Who taught you?
I just had an innate ability to pick flavors apart. I've always been able to do it. I could sit down to a meal that I never had before, and I could pretty much tell you what went in it.
So you're a good cook, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured you were.
I always, you don't get to be my size without having an understanding of how to get around the kitchen.
I understand.
But yeah, I mean, my kids to this day, when we get together, they don't want to go to a restaurant. They want dad to cook. They want dad to cook.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, what's your preferred cooking style?
I'm very eclectic. I love Southwestern and Mexican food. I love Italian food.
Well, that goes
Um,
without saying.
yeah. Um, I like French, but the problem I have with French is the prep time.
Yeah. And what about, can you get the ingredients if you want to do French?
You got to go very basic, and you have to kind of build it from scratch.
Right.
Like, I mean, even something as relatively simple as making a beurre blanc takes time.
Well, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when you're cooking for four kids and two adults, and you're working a full-time job. Where the hell
Yeah.
do you have time
Yeah.
to go through hours of prep? I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you come up with, a lot of times you come up with your own recipes, and you come up with things that you can prepare quickly enough. But I will put my chili up against anybody's.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. Do you put, well, chili? Is it chili con carne? Do you put
Yeah.
meat?
Yes.
And are you willing to tell me what types of meat you put in there, or is that a trade secret?
Oh, no trade secret. I tend to use lean beef.
Okay.
Um, and I have my little tricks and secrets, but nothing really major. I was blown away because we had a chili cook off at work 2.5 years ago, and I won the cook off. And the manager of our department was tasting my chili, and he said, "Do you put beef broth in it?" I said, "Actually, beef base." I was stunned that he actually could tell
You
that
picked it
was in
out,
there.
yeah.
Um, so I use beef base and tomatoes and tomato sauce. Um, and then one of the biggest mistakes Northern American um, chili makers make is they don't use cumin.
Hmm.
I mean, to me, it's not chili if there's no cumin in it.
I get you. I get you.
And I use multiple different types of chilies, but also I use dry mustard in it, Worcestershire sauce,
Okay.
and the thing that I do that I think kind of makes mine different. I want it thicker. I don't want a thin, soupy type
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
chili. And yet I want flavor. So I didn't want to add things like cornstarch
Yeah,
or
I got,
something
yeah,
like.
yeah.
So I experimented around, and then this goes back a number of years ago, but I finally came up with grated Parmesan,
Well, I never thought about that.
and I use that, and that thickens the chili up and adds that nice little tang.
Well, I was gonna say,
And
you threw me off with the mustard powder, and but now you completely shellacked me with the Parmesan. Uh, I'm gonna have to try it. I'm gonna have to try
it
it.
it really makes a big difference.
I'm
But
gonna have to try it.
yeah, and it got to the point where even the neighborhood kids, my daughter's friends, would say, "When are you going to make chili again?" And they all wanted to have
Russ's chili.
they wanted an invite when I would make chili. It got to the point where I was using um, a 16 quart stock pot to
That's a
make
lot
my
of
chili.
beans, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I know if I were in Texas, they would shoot me for that. But yeah, we always had beans in ours. Of course, you need to have beans when you've got four kids and you're trying to extend the meal a little bit
Yeah,
so you don't wind up in the poorhouse.
yeah, I got you. Russ, let me cut you off here.
Yep,
Okay, let's let for the record, pipes and cigars. You're not the owner, is that right?
that's correct.
Okay.
I know a lot of people had that misconception, or that I was the manager or whatever. I'm not. I've always just worked for the company. Um, we were a privately held company until 8 years ago. Well, it's almost 9 years now. 9 years ago, we were purchased by Cigars International, which Cigars International is also owned by Scandinavian Tobacco
Oh,
Group.
for God's sake.
So we are STG.
Okay,
And
well, talking
um,
about STG, and I'm sorry, I cut you off. I'm
no,
gonna
no,
fly
no,
off
go
the
ahead.
handle.
Go ahead.
Sutliff, STG, McBaron is STG, right?
No, no, no.
McBaron is
McBaron owns Sutliff.
McBaron owns Sutliff, and who owns Sutliff?
McBaron.
And who owns McBaron?
McBaron.
That's what you think. It's the
They're their
Italian
own
mob.
company.
It's the Italian mob. It's that
Okay.
it's that Laudisi. What is this Laudisi?
Laudisi is the wholesale division of smoking pipes.
But I mean, when I buy tobacco from, if I'm not mistaken, from another site, it goes through Laudisi. Am I mistaken?
They're just the wholesale distributor for Cornell and Deal. And in the U.S., they're the distributor for Savinelli pipes. They own Peterson pipes.
They own Peterson. Okay, so
pipes, but not the tobacco.
I got you. So I understand their reasoning for owning the license for the Peterson pipes and the Savinelli pipes in North America, let's say.
Yeah.
Now, why would they want to do business with Cornell and Deal? They're in-house.
They own Cornell and Deal. They own Cornell and Deal.
Did they begin Cornell and Deal? Was it an offspring of them?
No, Cornell and Deal was started by Craig and Patty Tarler.
Right.
And it was run by them until, maybe 6-7 years ago. And then Laudisi purchased Cornell and Deal.
Now, why would they want to sell to Laudisi?
Like why? Oh, because Craig and Patty were up in age, and the kids had an investment, emotionally in the business and everything, but they weren't as passionate about it as Craig and Patty were. And so it got to a point where it made more sense for a company that's dedicated to the tobacco and pipe business to take it over.
Okay, so it wasn't a shakedown.
Oh God, no. It was a very congenial purchase.
Now, when I'm talking about shakedowns, and I'm being facetious here.
Yeah.
Sutliff, Scandinavian Tobacco Group, is it the bigger companies buying off the smaller companies? Is that what they're trying to do, or no?
Well, look, it's the concept of vertical integration. Okay, so the concept of vertical integration is that you own every step of the process. So if you're let's say a food company, you own the farms that grow the food.
Right.
You own the factories that process the food. You own the trucks that distribute the food to the retailers.
My God, this is 1920s New York Italian.
And sometimes you even become the retailer yourself. So this way you have control of as much of the
product
production as you possibly can. And it simplifies things in a lot of ways. Um, and also, it means, for example, um, our company, STG, owns um, Orlick, which
Right.
makes Peter Stokkebye, which makes Escudo, and then we also own Lane Limited.
But hold on, Orlick, isn't Orlick a Danish tobacco?
Yeah,
So
our
they
company is Danish.
Orlick is Danish, right? Are you
Yeah,
talking about
and
Sutliff?
no, Sutliff is a separate company.
So
We don't own them.
so when you say we, who's we?
Scandinavian Tobacco Group.
Right. Okay. So they own Orlick.
They own Orlick,
Okay. Gotcha.
but they also owned Lane Limited.
And where are they based?
Well, they were in Georgia, but now the operation has been moved to Denmark because now they can save money by buying tobacco in larger quantities,
Right.
have everything made in one factory rather than running multiple
Right.
factories.
Right. Okay.
So it works out for the consumer in the end because we can keep costs down.
So does the mom and pop shop, uh, are they suffering because of this or no?
No, because the distribution of these products has remained the same.
Okay.
Now, Lane Limited has for a long time. Uh, the mom and pop shop can't buy directly from Lane; they have to buy from a distributor.
Right.
Lane only sells in case quantities,
Gotcha.
and so. But that doesn't interrupt anything because if they were buying their tobacco from XYZ distributor before, they can still buy it from that same place. Nothing has changed.
So Russ, owning the farms now. These farms, okay, look, there's a Sutliff needs to make money. It's a business. Business is about making money, okay? And I'm just using Sutliff. I could use Scandinavian, whatever, McBaron, whatever.
Yep.
Now, as in the wine producing business, they have to use chemicals. They have to. They're not going to lose $1 billion in wine because of a bad crop year, right? So they got to use them. And you see where I'm going with this now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the tobacco farmers? The tobacco farms that are owned or licensed by whatever big name Sutliff or STG. Do they use pesticides?
Actually, for pipe tobacco, most of the tobacco is grown by independent farmers. The pipe tobacco companies don't generally grow their own tobacco.
Okay, I thought they would own like acres and acres of.
No, the cigar companies own their own fields and produce their own tobaccos.
Okay.
But the pipe tobacco companies generally contract with certain farmers.
Because I guess that's the way the business was and is, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing.
Exactly. And as far as pesticides go, there are a number of things that they can do naturally without using chemicals.
Right.
There are certain things like mulching old tobacco leaves into the soil will protect against certain bugs.
Yes, and having certain bugs eat other bugs, I understand. But I mean, that's a hell of an operation here. This is a big cash, man.
Well, let's face it, the farmers that the pipe tobacco companies are buying from are also growing tobacco for the cigarette companies.
Right.
So if they're a big operation, it's not because of the pipe tobacco.
Right. I get you. I get you.
They're making their big money from the cigarette companies. But a lot of people say, well, does that mean that you don't get the pick of the litter, as it were? But for the most part, cigarette companies don't care about the quality grades of tobacco. The routine, ordinary stuff is fine for their purposes.
Right.
So pipe tobacco companies can still get the higher quality
Yeah. No,
leaf.
I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked that is because I just recently saw a video of you uh, showing off 3 products, and I don't know when this video was done, Russ. I'm sorry, but you had it was the idea that you had about uh, I'm going to say periquing a Virginia. Okay, and
Yep.
don't you have a tin? You had a tin you showed me before. Yeah, that's right there. Okay, is that still available?
No, that was a limited edition tobacco.
So that means that I can ask you for a couple of tins, and you got it in the basement somewhere that you can send over.
If I do, it would come out of my shelves. There are none left in the
I got you.
warehouse.
I got you. I'm just joshing.
Yeah, no, that came from there was a 1 year, just 1 year, there was a pipe show in New Orleans, and my friend Mark Ryan, who owned at that time the Daughters and Ryan tobacco company, he has since sold that to another company, but he also owned the LA Pouchet Perique factory, which, if you're going to buy Perique for pipe tobacco blends, that's the company you have to buy it from, because
Right.
there's one other processor, but they only sell to American Spirit cigarettes. All of their Perique goes to American Spirit. So all the factories like Ouellette and and Cornell and Deal and Sutliff, and they all buy Perique from Mark Ryan.
Right.
So it's about, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour drive from New Orleans to St. James Parish, I guess.
South or north?
What's that?
South or north?
I believe it's west.
Oh, okay.
And so I had gone down before the show to spend a couple of days with Mark, because I had never seen the Perique factory before, the Perique processing plant. And so they had a busload of people who were attending the New Orleans show brought over for a tour. And so, Mark asked me if people had questions about Perique and whatever, if I could help answer some of the questions, and I was more than happy to. And the day was over. Everybody loaded up in the bus and went back to New Orleans. And he and I were going to stay there that evening, along with a couple of other folks. And then we were all going to drive over to New Orleans in the morning and grab breakfast and lunch. And then we were going to go and get our stuff ready for the show. Well, as the people left, he and I were the only ones left. And I was just sitting there with him. He was really pleased with the turnout, and everybody was happy. And I said to him, have you ever thought about trying to process Virginia like Perique? And he said, no. He said, I talked to somebody from Brazil who had tried to do this before. He said, and basically the tobacco just disintegrated. And I said to him, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense if you were to try to treat it like Perique. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Virginia's got a lot more sugar. And it's got thinner leaves. So it's going to ferment
That's crazy. Yeah.
much more aggressively. And so that would cause the leaf to just fall apart.
Yeah.
I said, but what if you use less pressure and then you checked it frequently and maybe took it out sooner than you would with Perique? And Mark just kind of stared off into the sky, and you could hear the wheels turning,
Yeah.
and I think a little wood smoke was coming out of his ears. And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out his phone, and believe it or not, Mark still uses a flip phone. Um, and he pulled his phone out of his pocket and he called a Canadian farmer who grows the most beautiful lemon yellow Virginia you have ever seen in your life.
And hadn't you mentioned that it was organic?
Organic,
Okay.
absolutely beautiful tobacco. I mean, I still have some in storage that I just like to play around with every so often. And so he ordered 800 pounds, which would be enough for about 2 barrels. And they shipped it down. And they use bourbon barrels
Okay.
to make Perique.
Gotcha.
So they're big barrels.
Okay, I got you. Because I was saying,
And
man, 800 pounds. That doesn't sound 2 barrels. That doesn't sound like a lot. But anyways,
they bunch it up and then they put it in the barrels and then they put a lid on it. They put it under a big 12 by 12 cross beam and they put a railroad jack on top of the lid and they jack it down. And then after a couple of days, they replace the railroad jack with a screw jack and replace it. And then they check it every 3 months or so.
nothing is added. No water, no nothing.
No, it's not needed. It's just the moisture content of the tobacco itself.
Wow.
When they apply the pressure, the cell walls burst.
Right.
And so there's your fluid. And the fluid ferments. When you take a look at the top of the barrel, you'll see this dark fluid with bubbles coming up through it because the carbon dioxide is being produced by the fermentation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went ahead and started this thing. And it was probably only about 5 months after we had initially talked about this that he called me up and he said, Russ, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, we just took the tobacco out of the barrels. He said, and 5 months, he said, that's all we needed. He said, you won't believe it. He said, it went from being that bright yellow. He said, now it's kind of a dusky brown, like a tan. He said, but the smell will blow you away. He said, I'm taking a sample, I'm putting it in a bag, and I'm shipping it off to you. And then we got to figure out where we go from here. So I got a bag and I opened up the bag and I stuck my nose in it. And it was absolutely the last thing that I expected because the smell I got was malt. It smelled just like malt. And when I cut some up and I packed it into a pipe and lit it, it pretty much got the same thing. It reminded me of an ale. And so then we had to figure out what we were going to do with it.
But what were you going to call it, first of all?
Well, Mark had a different name for it, but because it's a Bayou product, and the tobacco came from Canada,
Mm-hmm.
we figured I figured we'd call it Acadian Gold.
which is cool.
And so the uncut version of it, just the straight tobacco, was called Acadian Gold. We had a version that we mixed with Perique, so that was Acadian Vapor.
Bloody hell, wasn't that too strong? Basically, you got two Perique products.
Yeah, but the Virginia is so low in nicotine that
Okay.
even with the fermentation, it wasn't that strong.
I would think you'd use it as a condiment, not as a base.
No, because you're talking about a low nicotine
Right.
base tobacco, so it didn't get stronger with the fermentation. It just changed the flavor.
Okay.
And then we had a version that we added some Latakia and a bit of unflavored black Cavendish to, and we called that Acadian English. And
Those are all gone, right?
they're all gone.
Any chance of that unearthing again?
The issue is the FDA in the U.S. Because they're now in control of tobacco products, and because of when it was introduced, they may not allow us to do another run of it.
Why don't you do it on the sly?
Yeah, there's no such thing as on the sly with
the FDA.
Well, and especially if you're an internet retailer.
Yeah, that's no. I'm just saying.
Yeah, they're. I mean, they're going to watch what we're doing. So, we wouldn't. Our one thing I'm super glad about is working for STG.
Okay.
Everything is open and above board. We follow the letter of the law. We don't skirt laws. We don't try to bend the laws. If there's any question as to whether something is legal or not, we'll scrap it if we're not certain.
Yeah, well, because they're gonna nail you and you're gonna have to pay lots of cash or to shut you down or something. I don't know. Russ, are these the golden years of pipe tobacco?
It depends on what side of the fence you're on, I guess.
Well, because man, look at the development in the last 20 years, just the last 20 years, and you can't compare it to what you were smoking in the 20s, man.
No. No. It's the golden years for the hobbyist pipe smoker. For the person who loves to try a bunch of different tobaccos and has a nice pipe collection and looks at this as a hobby, yeah, these are the golden years because there's more variety.
Well, yeah,
of boutique tobaccos that are available, high quality, personally curated by a smaller group of people. But in terms of the volume of pipe smoking, no, the golden years were the 30s, 40s,
and the 40s, yeah.
But as far as if you're a hobbyist, sure, yeah. I mean, 40 years ago, you didn't have a lot of these smaller companies,
right?
And even though our brand is owned by a larger corporation, Hearth and Home is still a boutique operation,
right?
So,
and when you smoke, I don't know how often you smoke, but when you smoke, do you have time to smoke for pleasure?
Yeah, now. I didn't going back, 7-8 years ago because I was constantly trying to develop new stuff. Now with the FDA regulations, I can't really develop much in the way of new tobaccos. So when I do smoke, I'm smoking for my enjoyment.
So you're telling me that every new blend that comes into your head and you just created has to pass through the FDA.
Uh, Here's the way it works. If I come up with a new blend right now,
With the stock you already have. You have the stock. It's ain't nothing new here.
yeah, yeah, well, and this is the ridiculous aspect of it. The tobaccos that I put into a blend may already have been approved by the FDA.
That's what I'm saying.
But when I combine them, it constitutes a new blend. And so I would have to submit that to the FDA for testing. It would cost us tens of thousands of dollars to pay for the testing.
Unbelievable.
And then it's at least a year before they would approve it, if they approve it at all.
And who's the sommelier there that says yes or no? Who's there?
Those people haven't, as far as I know, they really do not have a clue about tobacco.
So you got a job waiting for you there, man.
Yeah,
You know, you should be the nose guy. They'd have to have a sommelier there.
I'm a lot closer to a rocking chair than I am to starting a new career.
You can do it from home.
But that's what it amounts to, which makes no sense. I mean, we have gotten a way around it a little bit, because the end consumer can do whatever they want with the tobacco. So if I take 3 different tobaccos that have already been approved, and I sell the proper proportions already prepackaged,
Really?
and send it to the consumer, they can put it in a bowl and mix it together, right?
I know, but I mean, how does he know what type of percent? When I say he or she, how do they know what type of percentage to put in? Blah 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 blah.
It's all pre-measured.
What is this happening right now?
Yeah, we call them blend kits.
I get you. Okay. I see. And, Russ, that's why I want the catalog. Because I have a couple of catalogs I keep in the bathrooms everywhere, and I just look at them and I see blend kits, and I'm like, I want those bloody catalogs. Come on, pull some strings for me. Do something.
Yeah, I will make sure that you get the catalogs. But
you're a superstar, Russ.
Unfortunately, we had the issues a number of years ago, and we had to suspend international shipping.
I understand, and it's a legitimate issue, man. Seriously, I'd flip out. It's like, what? And anyways, it's that was a loss of money, which you explained to me. Yeah. But I want to talk about something else, Russ.
Yeah.
I want to talk about happy times.
Okay.
What's up with McClellan? Why didn't McClellan sell his bloody recipe to anybody else?
Mike and Mary were very protective of their company.
I understand, but
they're good friends. And I understand where they're coming from. It was 2-stage. Number one, their biggest concern was that they were going to sell it to somebody, and they were going to start trying to cheapen the product, buy lower grade tobacco, whatever, and continue to make the same tobaccos. And then that would
have cheapened the name.
Yes, it would have cheapened the name. And
yeah, but as consumers, we know that the company's been sold, and this person watered down the tobacco, so it's like it's not the same.
Yes, but on top of that, Mike had arrangements with a number of different farmers to buy basically the best tobaccos that they produced. And he was getting to a point where he couldn't get the quality. that he wanted.
because of the irregularity of the crop.
I don't know the details, and he never really got into that. But for example, they used to do a lot with red Virginia, and the red Virginia that they bought from this one farmer was really top notch. And so that they made that into a lot of different tobaccos. Their bulk blend was 5100.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would incorporate it into some of their flakes and whatever. And the last year or two that they were in operation, he was just not pleased with what he was able to get. And so he and Mary, um, they owned their own factory.
Mm-hmm.
I hate using the word factory.
No, I understand what you're saying, man.
But they owned it, and I believe a local university wanted to buy the building to make room to expand their campus, and he wasn't able to get the tobacco that they wanted. He wasn't sure that he was going to be able to sell it to anybody who was going to continue the legacy. And so at that point, it made more sense just to sell the building, take the money, and retire.
I understand. Nothing looked at. There was no light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, and on top of that, Mike dealt for years with all kinds of back issues. So, and he was doing a good portion of the actual physical labor himself. And, I'm sure it just reached a point where he was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I understand. And with all due respect to Mike, I don't know him at all. He likes to be in control, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked 20 years in the psychiatry. It doesn't take long for me to assess.
Yeah, and on top of that, he was also very frustrated by the FDA regulations.
I can imagine, man.
So when you combine all of those factors, it just pointed toward the door.
Yeah, I interviewed Jeremy Reeves, and we were talking about the FDA, and I asked the same question: if my dog is going to shut up. I asked the same question. I go, don't they have a nose at the FDA? And he just started laughing. He goes, those guys don't know their this from their you know what. Anyways.
Yeah, they're not tobacco people.
No, I obviously, but whatever. Let's not get into politics. I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, that's okay.
Russ, pressing any tobacco. Okay, not the already pressed tobacco, not the flakes, but I get some Hearth and Home Magnum Opus. I think that's a rough cut, right?
It's a ribbon, yeah.
It's a ribbon cut. Now, I take it, and I'm the type of guy that I have many tobaccos in my rotation. So depending what I'm eating that night or my mood, I'll choose my, just like wine, I'll choose my tobacco that I'll pair it with my food or whatever. And
sure,
let's say I'm not using the Magnum Opus, but I want to conserve it. So I bought myself, this is what I do. I bought myself a 6-ton press, and I press it. Now, am I altering the flavor of that tobacco?
Absolutely.
Bloody hell. So it's nothing. So the tobacco that I've just pressed is not what you came up with anymore. That's not the flavor profile that you sold to me.
Yeah, it's going to alter it. And
well, is it going to marry it?
It will marry it, which is an advantage.
There you go.
But anytime you press tobacco, first off, whenever you introduce pressure, you're creating heat.
Right.
And so the heat alone will be enough to change some of the tobacco.
Gotcha.
It has the biggest impact on the Virginias.
Right,
And
because of the high
again,
sugar content.
the high sugar content.
Right.
So that's where it has the biggest impact. I mean, if what you're looking to do is to arrest the change, probably the better move would be to use a vacuum sealer.
And is there something wrong with using a vacuum sealer?
No, the only thing you're trying to do there is to remove oxygen, so oxygen will not act to deteriorate the tobacco over the long term.
But doesn't oxygen isn't oxygen a factor in aging tobacco?
Oh, sure, but the biggest impact of oxygen is going to be again on Virginias. When you age Latakia blends, the Latakia tends to get softer down the road. So you lose some of that distinct smokiness. Burleys don't change a tremendous amount. Orientals will change.
Well, they'll lose their perfume.
They can, yeah.
So aging is what is it? A fad?
No, aging works tremendously well with the Virginia and Virginia Perique blends. It has a real impact. It deepens the flavor, kind of brings out a fruitiness. And in combination with Perique, that can be even better.
Right. I could see that happening. And are you saying any Virginia? Red Virginia?
Red Virginia less than bright.
Okay. I'm learning something here, man.
Yeah, Red Virginia isn't quite as sweet. And that's because Red Virginia is basically just bright Virginia that's matured. And in the maturation process, some of the sugar is caramelized.
Right. And this is all done by osmosis?
No, it's generally a fermentation process.
Okay, it's a process.
Yeah. It's you store the tobacco in such a way that that there's a fermentation that goes on. It darkens the tobacco and it converts some of the sugars.
So you're telling me now to pop open all my tins and smoke them? Is that what you're saying?
Virginias, I would, and Virginia heavy blends, I'd hold on to them.
What years? I mean, how many years? Sorry, maximum amount of years.
Maximum amount of years. I've smoked 30-year-old Virginia blends, and they were fantastic.
Now, the 30-year-old, was it really different than the 20-year-old Virginia blend you smoked?
Hard to say because there are crop differences from one year to the next.
Great. You just said something. Now, why, as in wine, don't they have Russ Ouellette's 1997 crop? Because every crop, every year is different.
Well, yeah, if you're buying in tins, a lot of times they do date the tins.
I know, but they should be on the forefront like a wine.
Yeah. From a practical viewpoint, my design department would get tremendously pissed off if I had to ask them for a new label every year.
Yeah, but could you imagine all us consumers? Oh, remember the 1997 blend? That was a good year. Yeah, I got 25 tins. Everybody's going to go crazy, and it's going to be a new type of cellaring.
Well, and that was done, though. If you look at McClelland, because their Christmas cheer,
Yes.
which was always a straight Virginia flake, they always were dated.
You see? Huh?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite smokes of all time was a 10-year-old tin of Christmas cheer 1995.
There you go. You see what you just said? You just
Yeah, I
gave me
know.
shit. You just gave me shivers because you put an image in front of my face, man. It's that tin, it's that tobacco. You know, it's not just a McClellan, it's a 1997 blah blah
Yeah.
blah. You know?
Yeah, I mean, when I lit that up, I couldn't believe it. It tasted like somebody put English toffee in my pipe.
Jesus.
It was
Oh
that
man.
it was that sweet and brown sugary.
Yeah, and you
I mean,
never forgot
just
the year. You never forgot the year, Russ.
oh
Never.
hell no.
1997. God damn, I gotta get myself some of that now. I gotta find it. It's probably worth $1,000 a tin or something.
You'd be lucky if you can find them, but if you could, you're definitely going to pay for it.
Oh well, what you say it's worth $1,000?
Um,
Come on, man, $1,000.
uh,
I'm not gonna spend $1,000 on 50 grams.
yeah. Well, no, they're 100 grams.
Ah, now it's a different story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So now I've given you a better reason to cough up 1,000.
Oh man, Russ, I don't want to take up more of your time, and we already gone over an hour. I could go on and on and on, and I swear I could go more than on and on with this because I've got 1,000 questions. Maybe we could pick this up some other time, and you know,
I'd be more than happy to.
Russ, you're a gentleman and you're a rock star. Don't forget it. And we think about that. The years. And if those marketing guys have a problem, call Laudisi. They're Italians. They'll take care of those guys. Bloody hell, I swear to God. Russ, thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome.